One night, you order food late. The app says it's delivered, but it's not at your door. You check the map and see the driver has stopped down the street in front of a dark house you don't recognize. You call, but there's no answer. Now imagine you hear a knock, not on your door, but from inside your house. What would you do?
Hello, night owls. I am Dusky Nights, and I bring you real-life horror stories that will help you sleep, or maybe keep you awake. But before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Also, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
I was 19 at the time, just starting my first job, delivering pizzas. The night had been mostly uneventful. Just the usual routine of driving, delivering, and collecting tips. But then there was this one order that I will never forget. It was a late delivery, maybe around 10 or 11 p.m., and I was tired, ready to get back to the restaurant and call it a night. The address I was given led me to a seedy hotel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place you try to avoid, but you have to go anyway for the job. When I arrived, the place was run down, flickering lights, peeling paint, and a strange smell lingering in the air. I wasn't exactly thrilled to be there, but I had a job to do. I walked up to the door and knocked, trying to keep my nerves steady. An older man, maybe in his 60s, opened the door. He was wearing a dirty, stained wife beater. His hair was unkempt, and there was this odd, almost predatory look in his eyes. I tried not to focus too much on his appearance, but it was hard to ignore the unsettling vibe he gave off. "Come on in," he said with a grin that didn't sit right. "Don't be shy. Meet Trevor," he continued, stepping aside to let me see into the room. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect, but then I saw the figure on the bed, a young boy, probably around 16, sitting shirtless on the bed, looking uncomfortable, staring down at the floor. I wasn't sure what was going on, but the situation felt off in ways I couldn't describe. The man gestured towards the boy, still smiling. "I bet you two would be really, really good friends," he said, almost too eagerly. Every instinct in my body screamed to get out of there, but I had to keep calm. I looked down at the pizza in my hands, and the man's words echoed in my head. I grabbed the money from him as quickly as I could, my heart racing, trying not to let my fear show. Without saying a word, I backed away slowly, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I didn't wait for anything else. I turned around and practically ran down the hallway, out the door, and back to my car. Once I was safely inside, I just sat there for a moment, trying to calm my breathing. My hands were still shaking. I couldn't shake the image of the boy on the bed, the man's unsettling grin, and the words he said. I couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened if I had stayed even a second longer. What was the real story behind that door? What did I walk into? I couldn't help but feel like I had narrowly escaped something much worse. And for the rest of the night, I drove around in a daze, my thoughts consumed by that one bizarre, terrifying delivery. I never thought a simple pizza delivery could turn into something so strange or so unsettling. It all started one evening when I ordered from my usual place, just the kind of night when you're too tired to cook, and a pizza seems like the perfect solution. Little did I know it was about to turn into an experience I wouldn't forget anytime soon. The delivery was taking longer than usual, which was strange since I lived just a few blocks away from the restaurant. As the minutes passed, I found myself growing more impatient, checking my watch, tapping my fingers on the countertop. It wasn't like the restaurant to take this long. My stomach was growling, and I just wanted my food. When I finally saw the delivery car turn the corner, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but something seemed off. The driver didn't pull into my driveway. Instead, he circled the block, driving past my house multiple times. At first, I thought maybe he missed the address, but then I started to feel uneasy. Was he trying to avoid me? I stepped out onto my porch and yelled, waving my arms, trying to get his attention, but no response. Of course, I couldn't hear him, but it didn't seem like he heard me either. I started to panic. Maybe he couldn't see me. Maybe he didn't know where I was. I tried calling the restaurant, but they didn't pick up, and by then I was getting desperate. I hopped on my bike and started following him. I figured if I could catch up, I could explain where my house was. But every time I got close, he would drive off, taking another turn down the street. I kept chasing him, pedaling faster, weaving through the quiet, empty streets. It took me about 40 minutes of chasing this guy around the block before I finally caught up to him. By then, I was out of breath and exhausted, my heart racing, not from the physical exertion, but from the weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. When I finally caught up, I knocked on the window of the car. The driver, a middle-aged man, looked at me in confusion. There was no recognition in his eyes, only a blank stare. He didn't speak, and when I gestured for him to roll down the window, he slowly did so, but there was a clear nervousness in his movements. I had a moment of realization he wasn't avoiding me on purpose. It was then that I understood. The man was deaf and mute. I had been yelling at him for the last 40 minutes, unaware that he couldn't hear a thing. And to him, a stranger on a bike, chasing him in the middle of the night, probably seemed like some creepy prank or an aggressive encounter. I explained to him in simple gestures that I was just trying to get my pizza. It took a few minutes of back and forth before we managed to communicate. He looked embarrassed, but finally handed me the pizza. I thanked him, but as I walked back to my house, I felt more unsettled than relieved. It wasn't the delivery that bothered me, but the realization that I had made a huge assumption. I had chased him down without understanding the full context of his situation, and I felt bad about how I acted. I get that companies want to give people with disabilities opportunities, but this whole experience made me think about how the right job matters for both the employee and the customer. It was clear that this was a challenging task for him and for me. For someone with a disability like his, maybe working in a quieter, less stressful environment would have been a better fit. But in that moment, it was just one of those strange encounters that left me feeling uneasy. As I finally sat down to eat my pizza, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I had been more of a part of the problem than I realized. It was one of those ordinary nights, nothing special. My parents had ordered pizza, and they told me I had to pay the delivery driver. I was 14 at the time, still awkward, and trying to figure out how to be, well, not socially awkward. This was going to be an uncomfortable experience. I just knew it. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, I was faced with the most striking woman I had ever seen. She was tall, slim, with the kind of beauty you only see in magazine covers or cartoons, like a superhero in real life. I mean, if this was some animated film, I probably would have flown backwards from the sheer force of her presence. Everything about her was perfect. Her smile, her walk, the way her hair caught the light, everything. And then there was me, a gawky 14-year-old kid with a patchy, half-grown beard that barely passed for facial hair. I was that awkward. My t-shirt was too big, my hair was a mess, and I was about to face the most uncomfortable moment of my life. She smiled at me and handed over the pizza. I was staring, not just at her face, but, well, her face and other parts, if you get what I mean. As I awkwardly handed her the $20 tip, I could feel the heat of my face turning red. I knew I looked ridiculous, but worse, I had this grin on my face, a creepy grin, like a Jason Voorhees-level creepy smile, wide, forced, and probably the most unsettling thing I had ever done without realizing it. All I could think was, God, this is the worst moment of my life. She smiled politely, though I could tell she was ready to be anywhere but here. She gave me a quick thank you and turned to leave. But me? Oh no, I wasn't done yet. My eyes were glued to her as she walked away, and I couldn't stop myself from watching every step she took. I couldn't help it. It was like a train wreck I couldn't look away from. She was so graceful, and I was just there, standing in the doorway, like a complete idiot. As soon as the door shut, I rushed back to the couch and buried my face in my hands. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to sink into the ground, vanish completely. My parents. They were in the other room, probably unaware of my utter humiliation. It was the kind of moment you replay in your head, over and over. Every awkward detail, every second of discomfort, and how badly I wished I could go back and do it all over again. This was my first real awful encounter with the opposite sex, and let me tell you, it set the tone for all future embarrassing moments to come. I can laugh about it now, years later, but back then, I just wanted to crawl into a hole. The tip. Sure, I gave her the money. But the real cost, it was my dignity. I never wanted to be that awkward kid again, but somehow I always found a way back to those cringe-worthy moments, like a sad memory that won't let you forget. It was New Year's Eve 2017. My husband and I had spent the entire day planning. We were excited. This year, we weren't going out to any party or gathering. We were going to enjoy the comfort of our home with a nice, quiet dinner, just the two of us. We spent hours debating the perfect restaurant. Finally, we placed our order through Bite Squad, setting the delivery time for 7:30 p.m. A confirmation email came through almost immediately. Everything was going smoothly. As the hours passed, we settled in, ready to relax. We set the table, opened a bottle of wine, and even turned on some background music to set the mood. We kept glancing at the clock, eagerly awaiting our dinner, but 7:30 came and went. Then 8. Still nothing. By now my stomach was growling and my excitement had turned to irritation. I grabbed my phone and called Bite Squad, hoping for an explanation. "Your card was declined," the agent said, without a hint of apology. I was shocked. I knew my account had more than enough funds. I double-checked everything before placing the order, so this didn't make sense. "Impossible," I replied. "My account has more than enough money. Let me call my bank." I hung up and dialed my card company, already feeling the tension building in my chest. They told me the same thing. "There's no decline on your card. No transactions were attempted since earlier today." I was stunned. So why did Bite Squad say otherwise? I called them back, now frustrated. The agent on the other end apologized profusely. "Oops, our bad," they said nonchalantly. "But don't worry. Here's 10% off your next order." 10% off? Really? At this point, I was livid. The restaurant we had ordered from had closed, and the few others nearby were closing for the night as well. It was New Year's Eve. Everything was shutting down, and we were left with nothing. My husband and I sat in silence for a moment, unsure what to do. It felt like the whole night was slipping away, and we were left stranded without a meal. My mind raced. What could we do? What were our options? But then, just as I thought we were doomed to an empty night, I remembered our local Chinese restaurant. They usually closed around 10, but maybe, just maybe, they would be open. I called them, and to my relief, someone picked up. "We're still open," they said. "Come on down. We'll have your food ready." It was 10:30 by the time we finally got our meal, but at least it wasn't a complete disaster. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease from the whole experience. Something about it all felt off. The mix-up with the card, the lack of urgency from Bite Squad, the sense of helplessness. It all seemed like a bad dream, a string of small misfortune tunes that had stacked up into something unsettling. And though the night ended on a good note, I couldn't help but think, what if this was just a glimpse of how easily things could go wrong? when you least expect it. As I sat down to enjoy the Chinese food, I couldn't stop wondering what would have happened if that restaurant hadn't been open. Would we have gone without dinner on New Year's Eve? It was one of those small moments, a blip in time, but it lingered, an uneasy reminder that sometimes even the simplest plans can unravel in the most frustrating ways. It started like any other night, a typical dinner, nothing special. My family had been ordering from the same pizza place for years, but that evening we decided to try a different one. The regular spot we loved was undergoing renovations, so I figured, why not? How bad could it be? I dialed the number, placed my order, and was told to wait. The guy on the phone told me the delivery would take about 30 minutes, so I set my watch, expecting a hot pizza within the hour. Time ticked by. The clock moved past the expected delivery time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then 20. I began to wonder if they had forgotten about me. By the time 30 minutes had passed, I was getting antsy. I paced around the apartment, feeling an odd unease that I couldn't quite explain. You know, that gnawing feeling in your gut when something just doesn't feel right. Another 10 minutes went by, then another. Now I was starting to feel my frustration building. I called the restaurant, but no one picked up. The silence in my apartment felt louder than it should have, like the walls were closing in. Finally, about 40 minutes late, I saw a car pull up in front of the apartment building. The delivery guy stepped out. A kid, maybe 17 or 18, with a tired look on his face. He barely looked like he'd graduated high school. As he approached the door with the pizza box in his hands, I noticed something strange. The bottom of the box seemed off. It was sagging as if it had been sitting somewhere far too long. And then, just as I braced myself for the usual, "Hey, sorry I'm late" spiel, something unexpected happened. The box tore open at the bottom, spilling chunks of the pizza onto the pavement below. My heart sank. The kid stood there, motionless for a moment. There was no apology, no sign of regret, just annoyance. He seemed more upset about the pizza than I was. "Seriously?" I asked, trying to hide my frustration. But instead of apologizing, he shoved the soggy mess of pizza toward me like I was supposed to accept it. I couldn't believe it. My stomach turned. I told him I wasn't accepting this. No way. I reached for my phone to call the restaurant, my fingers shaking. This couldn't be happening. The kid just sighed, still looking like he was about to burst. I could practically hear his thoughts. "I'm done with this." He walked off, leaving me standing there, staring at the ruined pizza on the ground. I finally got through to the restaurant, explained what happened, and the person on the other end of the line was quick to offer a solution. "We'll send another one right over," the voice on the phone said, "and you can keep the mess as an apology." I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or disgusted. I decided to wait. 40 more minutes passed. The sound of my watch ticking seemed like a countdown to the inevitable. The clock struck 8:30. The replacement pizza finally arrived, and I couldn't have been more underwhelmed. The kid who brought the pizza this time was a little older, but no less indifferent. He handed me the box, still no sign of an apology, as if I were just some inconvenience to him. As I took the pizza from him, the box felt lighter than it should have been. When I opened it, I couldn't help but let out a quiet sigh. The pizza looked wrong. It was bland, almost lifeless. The crust was thick but lacked any flavor, like they'd forgotten to put salt in the dough entirely. The toppings? They were barely there. Cheap, rubbery cheese that stuck to the roof of my mouth like glue. The bologna was the kind you get from the store in pre-sliced packs, the kind you never really want to eat. And the mushrooms. They were the disgusting, slimy canned variety that I'd never seen anywhere except on poorly made pizzas. I stared at it for a long time, wondering what had gone so wrong. Why had I chosen this place? How had they failed so miserably? With the pizza in front of me, I couldn't help but think that it was a metaphor for the night. Everything that could have gone wrong did. And just like that, the night was ruined. I couldn't even finish the pizza. The taste lingered in my mouth long after I pushed the plate away, and I promised myself that it would be the first and last time I ordered from that place, but something about it stuck with me. The unbothered delivery guy, the apology that didn't feel like one, the horror of the ruined pizza. It all felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't shake. That night I didn't just lose my appetite. I lost my trust in a simple meal, in the idea that what you order and what you receive will always be what you expect. So now, whenever I order food, I wonder, what's really in that box? What happens behind the scenes? And most unsettling of all, is the pizza really the worst thing that could happen? It was a regular evening, and I ordered Domino's. The app said 30 to 45 minutes, so I settled in. About 40 minutes later, my phone rang. It was the driver, sounding irritated. "I've been knocking for the last 5 minutes. Why aren't you answering the door?" I was only 15 feet away, so I should have heard a knock. But I'd smoked earlier, and my head was clouded. Maybe I just didn't hear him. I grabbed extra tip money and opened the door. Nothing. The porch was empty. I called the driver back. He apologized, saying he was at the wrong house next door and would be there in 5 minutes. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. I called again, but no answer. I called the restaurant. "Hello, this is Domino's. How can I help you?" The employee said. "Yeah, I placed an order, but the driver's not here." "I see," the person said slowly. "Well, I have some bad news. The driver's car was just stolen." I blinked, confused. "What? His car was stolen?" "Yes, he had a habit of leaving his car running. He was outside your place when someone stole his car." I couldn't process what I was hearing. I felt guilty, annoyed, and slightly horrified. I asked how they planned to resolve this, but they were focused on apologizing. I told them to apologize to the driver for me. I didn't even know if he was okay. As I sat back down, I couldn't help but feel bad for the guy. There I was, waiting for a pizza, and his night had completely derailed. The worst part, I never found out what happened to the driver. I did get my pizza, eventually. But from that day forward, every time I ordered from Domino's, I wondered if the delivery guy was actually going to show up. But there's one thing I know for sure. After that, Domino's never missed a delivery within 30 minutes again. It was just another lazy evening. My friend ordered through a delivery app. She'd been busy all day, and the idea of having someone bring food right to her door felt like the perfect way to unwind. She placed the order, picked her meal, and waited, watching TV while anticipating her dinner. But Tim dragged on. What was supposed to be a quick delivery turned into a long wait. 40 minutes passed, then an hour, and my friend was getting impatient. Around an hour and a half into the wait, she finally heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She peered out of the window, expecting to see the familiar delivery car. But instead, she saw the delivery driver standing at her front door, his face twisted in irritation. She opened the door slightly, expecting him to hand her the food and move on. But that's not what happened. The driver immediately began banging on the door, his voice rising in frustration. "I'm not giving you your food until I get a tip," he yelled through the door. "I've been waiting, and you need to pay me now." My friend froze. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was starting to feel dangerous. The man was demanding money. She could hear his voice shaking with anger, and that sent a chill down her spine. She didn't even have the food yet, and now he was threatening her. Her first instinct was to call the police. She dialed 911, her heart racing, while keeping one eye on the man outside her door. There was no food in sight. The driver wasn't holding any bags, no pizza boxes, no bags of food. He was just standing there, screaming, "You'd better give me the tip, or I'll break down this door. I'll make sure you regret it." Panic set in. My friend's mind was racing. Was this some kind of twisted scam? What had happened to her food? And then the truth hit her like a slap in the face. The man had eaten their food. She could hear his voice shaking with irritation, but the reality of the situation hit her harder than any threat he could make. He was demanding a tip for food he had already eaten. The fear she felt in that moment was palpable. What if this man was more than just angry? What if he was dangerous? Minutes dragged on like hours. She could still hear him outside yelling threats, but no food appeared, no delivery bag. Just a man who was angry that his plan wasn't going as expected. She kept the phone pressed to her ear, the dispatcher telling her that officers were on their way. And then, finally, the sound of sirens cut through the air, distant but growing louder. When the police arrived, it didn't take long for them to arrest him. They didn't even let him explain himself. The driver was taken into custody, his body language defeated now, and the tension in the air finally began to lift. The delivery app was notified of the situation almost immediately. They called my friend, apologizing profusely for what had happened. My friend was shaken. She still couldn't believe it happened. But when the adrenaline faded, she couldn't help but laugh. It had been a terrifying experience, but in the end she didn't mind the free food. It was the last time she used that delivery app, though. She couldn't shake the feeling that the line between convenience and danger was much thinner than she had ever imagined. Have you ever had a delivery experience go horribly wrong? Maybe something terrifying happened while you were waiting for your food. Share your story with us. We'd love to hear about your most unsettling delivery experiences. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling stories that remind us just how unsettling the ordinary can become.